What up, perps? Kid Copious back in effect. Purple State Party. You know what we're doing here? We're repping America, the center, and common sense. Wow, I never thought I'd actually get to sit down today. It has been one frustrating day. Let's just start with that, I guess. My mom has been needing care for a couple years now. My wife has been over there pretty much every couple hours for a long time. When we finally got some help in, we got some caretakers or caregivers to come in, and my brother has just been absolutely a monster, walking around in his underwear, smoking in the house, disrespecting the caregivers. I mean, just last night he would try to convince one to take my mom up to a bar, and he said, "Oh, I'll buy you drinks." And the lady's like, I'm here at work and I'm taking care of your mom. And now my brother's yelling and screaming at my mom. Well, he's screaming at my mom and my wife about, "Oh, I can't take my mom anywhere." Like, man, what an idiot. Totally is. And he's really very much the liberal Democrat. He wants to be the victim, even though he's the problem. And that's kind of the theme of today, oversight. These liberal policies with no oversight, it's just costing everybody. It really is. It's just costing everybody. And that's not the only thing that's costing people things. But, wow, it's certainly in the headlines right now. So let's get to it. So, one of the lessons that I learned about Jesus is that it's important to retain a lot of the qualities of a child. The optimism, the curiosity, the humility, and to, want to better yourself. And, for years here, I've talked about how stupid it is to raise taxes on rich people. It's kind of counterproductive, blah, 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 blah. I really bought into the whole trickle-down theory. But nowadays, the trickle-down theory is really a thing of the past. It's not going to work. There used to be a time in this country where companies would brag about how well they treated their employees, and they took pride in that. And now it's like Goodhart's law. Stock prices are everything, and they'll do everything to keep their stock prices up. And, when we talk about taxes, people say, "Oh, well, they'll move to other states, blah, 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 blah." But I was watching Drew Gooden. You might know of him. He was the guy who on Vine drove past a sign that said "road work ahead," and he said, "Oh, I sure hope it does." And he became famous off that. That's a kind of funny way to become famous, but he's a good guy. He's a funny guy. I love his videos, Drew Gooden. But he was talking about taxes. And I don't know why he all of a sudden stepped out of his normally comedic role to talk about this, but he brought up a really interesting point. In 1950, the top tax rate was 91% on any income over $400,000 for married couples filing jointly. And now, that equates to about like an extra $4 million. So in other words, the 91% was only paid on income above $400,000, or in today's terms, income above $4 million. And back then, the 1950s, the 1960s, the 1970s, people could work a decent job. One parent could remain at home with the kids. You could buy a house, you could buy a car, you could have what you wanted. And I'm starting to change my mind on the tax rates, And then he mentioned that sometimes people like Jeff Bezos didn't pay taxes. And I was like, well, that's kind of weird. But it's true. In 2007 and 2018, Bezos didn't pay a dime in federal income tax. And the same was true with Elon Musk in 2018. And I've always been a supporter of, if you could do it legally, then I'm fine with it. But my mind is starting to change. I'm starting to realize that when these billionaires are getting away without paying taxes, or paying like very low taxes, I mean, a few of them, are paying like 1% by the time they do all the deductions. But the deductions are not coming the same way. What it used to be is companies would build new factories, hire more people. They would give people more money. And that was one of the ways to reduce their profits so that they weren't taxed as much, or their corporate tax wasn't as much. Nowadays, they use other methods to get around paying their actual fair share. And I think that's one of the things that needs to change, because we need to, I think really what we need to do, especially in this country, is we need to get wages up, but maybe not by raising prices, not in a way like, because kind of what we saw here in California, when they artificially raised the minimum wage for fast food workers, we saw a lot of people lose their jobs. We've seen higher prices. I mean, the prices at McDonald's and some of these fast food places is just ridiculous nowadays. It's almost unjustifiable. Like, you can't spend that kind of money on it. You know, McDonald's recently had a 10-piece McNugget with fries and a drink for $8, and they're calling it like a cheap option. And people are like, look, $8 for like a handful of crap really isn't that good of a deal. And I think the important thing to take from this is that we always have to be willing to change our minds. We have to be. It's not a matter of flip-flopping. Flip-flopping is when you just do it for political clout. You know, you don't really mean it. It's not really a meaningful change. It's just you start saying different things. We in this country need to start doing different things, because we have too many people in poverty. We have too many grinders out there that are barely getting by. And then you find out that, you know, Elon Musk doesn't have to pay taxes because he figured out a way around it. I don't know. I think that might be kind of the hub of this broken puzzle right now. But anyhow, I want to get more into that later on. I want to do more research, try to figure out what we can do there. I'm starting to see the kind of the advantage of a flat tax, but we need to get back to the way businesses used to operate, where the workers were the most important thing, not the stock price. I think that's what we've lost. Now, granted, some people are making a lot of money because of the stock prices. You know, I understand that. I don't want to destroy everyone's 401k. But going back to the topic of oversight, can't we have people in this country who can figure it out? Why are we not prioritizing that a little bit more? I don't know. So, you know, 5 years ago, right around the time of January 6th, oh boy, the darkest day in American history, if you ask some people. If you ask me, it was people who were protesting something that they thought had gone wrong in the election. So be it, whatever, okay? But there were two bombs found. There were bombs found at the DNC and the RNC, the Republican National Convention buildings, and the Democratic National Convention building. And if the bombs had gone off, there was a fair chance that some school kids could have been hit in that. Fortunately, the bombs were duds. But 5 years went by. All through the Biden administration, nothing was ever discovered about this guy. Well, recently, they went back over cell phone data and other evidence that had been collected but not processed. And they found this dude. And from all accounts, it looks like he's a black dude. I don't think that really matters, but it just, you know, in this day and age, we need to label everything, so let's label it. And from all accounts, it looks like he was kind of one of those, like, maybe one of those incel people, one of those kind of antisocial people out there. And, you know, most accounts show that he started buying the bomb-making material long before the election. People try to say that he is disappointed in the election. But, he bought it long before the election and the results came in. So I don't think that really had anything to do with it. But what the F was Biden and his FBI and DOJ doing? Why did they come through this evidence? And it's, you know, there's really two answers that come to mind. One is that since the bombs were placed at both locations, a Democrat and a Republican location, they couldn't politicize it. They couldn't blame it on MAGA. So it really wasn't that big of a issue for them. The bombs didn't go off, so nobody was killed. There wasn't a lot of pressure to solve it. And the second answer, and I think this is the one that's true, is it was just gross incompetence. That's kind of the oversight we're talking about right now. where it wasn't that important, so they didn't really spend a lot of time on it. They had evidence that they could have looked at, but it wasn't that big of a deal. Well, it was, because fortunately, this guy didn't try again. Fortunately, this guy didn't try again and succeed this time in setting off a bomb. But it kind of speaks, to one political party. It really does. I don't see where... I haven't heard any stories of Republican governors or whatever having this lack of oversight. I don't see that with Trump. I don't see Trump having something and just not looking at it. I don't see that. I see them aggressively going after different bad actors, depending on the way you look at their policies and all that, whatever. But, we have way too many illegal immigrants enter the country. They go after them. We have drugs streaming in from a country that's being run by a dictator. We go after them. Iran starts popping off. We go after them. We don't just sit on actionable intelligence. And that's what Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, that's what they did. They took these data dumps and pieced together the movements of an individual and started tracking his purchases and his movements, and they started matching him to video, and they caught the guy. And it's just, to me, it's not really a matter of blaming the other side for being incompetent. It's a matter of blaming the other side for just not doing their due diligence. And speaking of due diligence, Tim Walz, governor there in Minnesota, you remember him. He was the guy that was running with Kamala Harris. He was going to be the vice president. And even during those times, Kamala Harris was being warned that Tim Walz was asleep at the wheel. 400 current staff members say that the governor systematically retaliated against whistleblowers for reporting widespread fraud in their in the welfare food department. I kind of lost it right here. The Feeding Our Future program. And keep in mind, 400 employees came forward out of a group of only 480. There was 480 employees. Over 400 of them came forward and said, this guy is ignoring the evidence of fraud. Like one of them said right here, we let Tim Walz know of fraud early on, hoping for a partnership in stopping fraud. But no, we got the opposite response. Tim Walz systematically retaliated against whistleblowers using monitoring, threats, repression, and he did his best to discredit the fraud reports. Yeah. $250 million in stolen funds from a federally funded child nutrition plan. They've already convicted over 50 people. The head of this, because apparently it's now, like I always say about Trump, why give the media something to latch on to? I was talking about my brother at the start of the show, right? And we were talking about, my wife and I were talking about how on day 2, he gave the caregiver cause for concern. And my wife said, I think it was day 1 of this person coming there. And I said, well, now we got to be specific because we can't give them something to latch on to. Okay, it was day 2 of that organization sending people to our house. Well, Tim Walz did the same thing with people bringing up the fact that most of the people involved in this fraud were from the Somali community and may have even sent money back to Somalia where terrorists got their hands on it. And they're quick to point out, of course, that Amy Bach, the founder of Feeding Our Future, was convicted at trial. One defendant was actually convicted of trying to bribe a juror. Isn't that fun? But Tim Walz wants to focus in on the fact that we shouldn't be blaming the Somalis. He was asked on NBC's Meet the Press, and pretty mainstream media, left wing, Christian Welker pressed him on the allegations and asked him if he takes responsibility for failing to stop the fraud in the case. His response, well, certainly I take responsibility for putting people in jail. I will note it's not just Somalis. Minnesota is a generous state. Minnesota is a prosperous state, a well-run state. We're AAA bond rated, but that attracts criminals. Those people are going to jail. We're doing everything we can, but to demonize an entire community on the actions of a few, it's lazy. Well, what about you? What about you, Mr. Walz? I mean, you didn't do anything when people raised the red flags. What's the point of waving a red flag if nobody responds? And then to add the cherry on top, when it started to become more and more apparent that Amy Bach and this Feeding Our Future were submitting fake documents to get money from the government, they started questioning some of the filings and started slowing down the approvals. You know what they did? True liberal fashion. They filed a lawsuit accusing the state of discrimination. That's some balls on that babe, isn't it? I mean, she's committing fraud. The state goes, something's wrong here. And she goes, I'm suing you for discrimination. Wow. Yeah. But no oversight. He was freaking told that this was going on. And as governor, he did nothing about it. And hundreds of millions of dollars went just disappeared. It mirrors what happened here in California, where during COVID, during the pandemic, they were handing out checks based on falsified documents. Prisoners were filing for COVID relief, saying that they couldn't work their job as a hairdresser. They're in prison. No oversight. The homeless problem here in California. Billions of dollars have been spent. Nothing has been solved. The number has only gotten bigger. No oversight. We're not going to look into that. The train to nowhere. Billions of dollars spent. No track laid. All kinds of people get paid. No oversight. Nobody's looking into if there was fraud or if there's just waste or if we're just paying companies to do redundant things or we're overpaying people. No oversight. Just spend the money. Not my money. It's taxpayers' money. F them. Another great example. This happened last month. ICE arrests Uzbekistan criminal, illegal alien, and wanted terrorist driving 18-wheeler in Kansas. This dude, he fled Uzbekistan because they were trying to arrest him in 2022 for being a member of a terrorist organization. He was part of the propaganda distribution and recruitment. But he came into America, and under Biden and Mayorkas, he was let go into the population, went to Pennsylvania, and managed to get himself a commercial driver's license so he could drive a truck. No oversight. No vetting. This guy was wanted by a country, and we couldn't figure that out, either through laziness or stupidity. He came in to this country and ended up getting a job even though he was wanted in his home country for terrorism. Oversight. That's all I'm asking for. If you want to build the bullet train, build the bullet train. But let's keep the money in view. Same thing with the homeless situation here in California. Tim Walz back in Minnesota. You want to do these things? You want to feed the needy? Great. You want to give it to these NGOs to facilitate feeding these people? Great. I don't have a problem with that. But if you're just going to do it willy-nilly and they defraud you, I am not paying taxes so criminals can live a life of luxury. I don't think that's really too much to ask. Whether you believe in these programs or not, let's be honest with it. If we're giving somebody money to buy crack pipes to distribute on the streets, let's make sure they're spending the money on the crack pipes. That's all I'm asking. I'm not for that. I don't think we should be spending money giving out crack pipes, but whatever, or clean injection sites and all that crap. But if we're going to do it, can we make sure that the money's not being frauded out? Because we have to maintain our quality of life, okay? Here in California, here in the country, and in every state, all right? Before you raise our taxes, can we get an accounting? Please. It's not that much to ask for. Make sure that every dollar spent is going to what it was supposed to be spent on. Even if you have to hire additional people for your oversight committees. But people like Tim Walz or Gavin Newsom, who punish whistleblowers, who punish people who speak out against waste and fraud, man, how in the hell are these people being elevated to almost vice president? Tim Walz was almost the vice president of this country, and when warned about fraud, he punished the people who were doing the warning. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. And you know what? Before anybody could say it, I expect the same thing out of the Republicans. I expect the same thing out of Trump. I want oversight. If somebody's effing up, let's deal with it. If somebody's defrauding the Republicans, they should be looking into it. But so far, I'm seeing it because they took the evidence in the D.C. bombing case and found the bomber. They seem to keep their eye on the ball. All right, whatever. Maybe they're not perfect. Who is, really? But one of the reasons why we need this third party in this country, a purple party, a party that embraces the best of both sides, is that maybe if we start over from scratch, maybe the nepotism won't blind us to the fraud, deceit, and waste. I don't know. So, by now everybody's heard about how an Afghan national, he had worked with our American forces over in Afghanistan. He drove from Washington State to D.C. and shot and killed a couple of guardsmen. Well, mental health advocates had been warning months before the shooting that this guy, Lakanawal, I can't pronounce his name, I'm sorry. He had been mentally declining for years. He was isolating himself from his family, from his wife. They tried to contact him, and he essentially refused help. And, eventually he dropped out of his English classes. He stopped going to work, and he just started taking long road trips. Really just disappeared from his family. All the warning signs were there. And this isn't about blaming somebody for not doing something. We have a problem in this country with mental illness. We are very reticent to force people into care, especially in blue areas. They really don't want to force people into care. But, there's mounting evidence in a lot of these cases. A lot of warning signs, a lot of red flags again that were missed. And we need to find a way to compassionately get these people into care. There's too much mental illness out there. I just saw a video the other day of a woman who was walking back into her apartment, walking her little dog, and a man just came up to her and slammed her up against the wall, started groping her. She broke free. He tackled her again. Fortunately, a bystander intervened. And they were able to catch this guy. But you could see by his actions that he was mentally ill. Obviously sane people don't just randomly attack women on the streets. But for too long, especially, and I see it all the time here in California, we think it's compassionate to leave them out on the streets. I know, I'm just repeating myself at this point. But we have to do something about mental health in this country. We need to do something about wages, and we need to do something about mental health. We need to become proactive and start insisting that people get help. And if people really have really deep problems, we need to get them the help, whether they want it or not. But one of the things that we have to stop doing is then using that mental illness as an excuse for them to commit crimes. Here in California, you can get out of bank robbery if you just say you're nutso. And I use that term, nutso, or in other terms, because I myself am one of those people. I've struggled with my mental issues. And the way I got straight again was by police and judicial intervention. I was essentially forced. I had a choice, jail or rehab. Right? And when things started falling apart for me in my sobriety, I had to be on medication. But I was one of the ones who willingly took the medication until I felt like I was back on stable ground. But a lot of people out there, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. And we have to start working on that, because that is one of the root causes of what we're seeing on the streets, where we have people who are self-medicating and they're already got mental issues and they're just out on the streets. And people like the guy who did the shooting of the National Guard people. There were warning signs, but nobody could do anything. Compassion is helping. The person doesn't want it. It's not compassionate to go, oh, well, that's your choice. Now, is it? Now, I don't know what the solution is, other than the fact that when the evidence mounts that somebody is a danger to themselves or others, we need to start doing something about it. And if they don't want to comply, then we have to put them somewhere. Because it's not fair to the rest of us to have random crazy people who are hearing voices and stuff like that out on the streets. But again, that goes to the lack of oversight from a lot of these blue governments. I don't know how they handle it. I can't really speak to how they handle it in red cities or red states, all right? Maybe they're just as bad. All I can relate is what I see here in California, which is completely blue. This is a one-party state. And their answer so far has been, just leave them on the streets. And then when they do something wrong, put them back on the streets? Like, when do we draw the line? It's not too much to ask of our government, whether it's a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, whatever, for a little oversight, to pay attention to what matters. And maybe if we do a little bit of that, maybe things will get better. Imagine how much money we could have for families that really deserve and have earned help if the money wasn't being pissed away on fraud or corrupt NGOs. Something to think about. I mean, the solution is right there. We have the money to fix these problems. Like people always say, California's the fourth largest economy. We have the money, but we lose so much of it on fraud and waste. And that all goes back to oversight. And right now, that lands on the desk of Gavin Newsom, who, in my opinion, is one of the worst politicians ever because he's just so obviously a politician. I see it in LA with Karen Bass. What is she doing? What is she doing? A year ago, major portions of our state burned down. Literally burned down. Nothing left. Because people had taken their eye off the ball. They didn't look at what was important. They thought that like DEI quotas and things were the solution. Well, DEI quotas don't put out fires. Where was the water? Where was the equipment? Where was the manpower? No oversight. None whatsoever. Tim Walz frauded out of hundreds of millions of dollars simply because he didn't want to look at the problem. That's what we need to do in this country. That's what we need to do as individuals. We need to confront our problems, not hide from our problems. Anyhow, I hope that made some sense. A lot of times I'm just up here freestyling. I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. I just, this is my passion. I'm trying to fix the world. Maybe I'm the most naive son of a bitch out there. But I'm King Copious. I'm Purple State Party, and so are you. Love one another. Keep on grinding. And just like I did last night at She Wants Revenge, dance it out.